Look at the palms of your hands for a second. Trace the lines. Feel the texture of your skin, and notice the weight of your body pressing against your chair. Everything feels solid, right? You have a name, a history, and a set of beliefs that tell you exactly who you are and where you are. But what if I told you that all of that is a carefully constructed illusion? What if the reality you navigate every day is actually a thin veil draped over something much more chaotic, much more mysterious, and frankly much more terrifying? We aren't just talking about a movie plot or a passing thought you have at 3 in the morning. We are talking about ideas so potent that once they enter your brain, they act like a slow-moving solvent, dissolving the world as you know it, until nothing is left but the raw, unmapped territory of existence. If you are the kind of person who likes to feel safe in their worldview, you should probably turn this off right now. But if you have ever looked at the stars and felt a strange sense of vertigo, or looked in a mirror and wondered if the person staring back is actually you, then you are in the right place. Today we are deep diving into 7 specific books that don't just challenge your perspective, they actively dismantle it. These aren't just stories, they are cognitive hazards. By the time we reach the end of this list, the floor beneath you might not feel quite so solid anymore. Let's start with a book that operates like a virus for the mind. It's called Simulations and Simulacra by Jean Baudrillard. Now, you might have heard this title dropped in film essays because it famously inspired the movie The Matrix, but the actual philosophy inside is far more unsettling than anything Hollywood could put on a screen. Baudrillard's core argument is that we have moved past the point where we can distinguish between reality and a representation of reality. He calls this the hyper-real. Think about the world we live in today. We spend our lives looking at screens that show us versions of things. We see photos of food that look better than the actual meal tastes. We follow celebrities whose public personas are entirely manufactured. We live in cities designed to look like themed experiences. Baudrillard argues that the map has actually replaced the territory. We are so surrounded by signs, symbols, and simulations that the original thing, reality itself, has effectively disappeared. It has been replaced by a copy that is more real than the real. When you read this book, you start to look at your social media feed, your favorite TV shows, and even your own personality, and you start to ask, what part of this is actually authentic? Is there an original version of me, or am I just a collection of simulated behaviors I've picked up from a simulated culture? Baudrillard suggests that we are living in a desert of the real, wandering through a hall of mirrors where every reflection is a reflection of another reflection. It's a book that makes you realize that perhaps the reason you feel so disconnected sometimes isn't because you're doing something wrong, but because there is nothing left to connect to. The real world has been quietly turned off, and we are all just residents of a very convincing hologram. If that sounds a bit too much like a conspiracy theory, let's pivot to something grounded in the most rigorous science we have. Our second entry is The Hidden Reality by Brian Greene. This book takes the tools of theoretical physics to show you that your sense of being in a single, unique universe is almost certainly a delusion. Greene explores the concept of the multiverse, but he doesn't do it like a comic book. He does it through the lens of mathematics and cosmology. Imagine for a moment that our entire universe is just a single bubble in a vast, infinite ocean of other bubbles. Greene walks us through different variations of this idea. He talks about the quilted multiverse, where because the universe is infinite, every possible arrangement of matter must repeat itself an infinite number of times. That means, mathematically speaking, there is another version of this exact moment happening right now on a distant planet, where another version of you is listening to another version of me. Then he gets into the inflationary multiverse and the brain multiverse, where our entire reality might just be a 3-dimensional slice of a much higher dimensional space. Reading this book ruins your sense of scale. You start to feel like an ant trying to understand the blueprint of a skyscraper. It strips away the comfort of being the center of the story. If there are infinite versions of you, which one is the real you? If every choice you've ever made has also been unmade by another version of you in a different dimension, do your choices even matter? Greene doesn't just make you question your reality. He makes you realize that your reality is just one tiny, insignificant frequency in a cosmic symphony that is so loud we can't even hear it. But maybe the problem isn't the scale of the universe. Maybe the problem is the very equipment you are using to perceive it. That brings us to book number 3. Phantoms in the Brain by V.S. Ramachandran. This is a journey into the deepest, darkest corners of neuroscience. Ramachandran works with patients who have suffered strange neurological shifts. People who believe their own limbs don't belong to them, or people who can see perfectly fine but believe they are totally blind. The terrifying takeaway from this book is that what you call your reality is entirely a fabrication of your brain. Your brain is a meat computer locked inside a dark, silent bone box. It never actually sees the sun or feels the wind. It only receives electrical signals from your nervous system and then builds a 3D model that it presents to you as the world. Ramachandran shows how easily this model can be broken or manipulated. For example, he discusses phantom limb syndrome, where the brain continues to feel intense pain in a hand that is no longer there. This proves that the physical world and your perceived world can be completely out of sync. If your brain can make you feel a hand that doesn't exist, what else is it making you feel that isn't really there? Is the color red really red, or is it just a specific electrical pulse that your brain has decided to label as red? This book forces you to confront the fact that you are essentially a passenger inside a biological hallucination. Your sense of self, your emotions, and your vision of the physical world are all just a high-quality movie being projected on the inside of your skull. When you finish this book, you don't look at the world anymore. You look at the mechanism that creates it, and you realize how incredibly fragile that mechanism is. Now, if you want to take that idea to its absolute extreme, you have to read book number 4, Biocentrism by Robert Lanza. This is the book that turns the entire scientific worldview upside down and shakes it until the pockets are empty. Most of us are taught that the universe existed for billions of years before life ever showed up. We think we are just small, lucky accidents in a cold, indifferent cosmos. Lanza argues the exact opposite. He proposes that life and consciousness are not the products of the universe, but the creators of it. He bases this on quantum physics, specifically the idea that particles don't have a definite state until they are observed. If the act of looking at something is what causes it to take a solid form, then the universe cannot exist without a conscious observer to look at it. Lanza argues that space and time are not things that exist outside of us. They are the language of our minds. Everything you see, the mountains, the stars, the person sitting across from you, is part of a biological process. This is incredibly hard for the human brain to wrap itself around because we are so conditioned to believe in an objective world that exists whether we are there or not. But biocentrism suggests that the world is more like a video game that only renders the room you are currently in. When you leave the room, the data is still there, but the physical reality dissolves until you come back. It turns you from a tiny speck in the universe into the very foundation of the universe itself. It's an empowering thought, but it's also deeply isolating. If reality is a product of your consciousness, then you are essentially alone in a world of your own making, trapped in a feedback loop of your own perception. Moving away from pure science and into the realm of philosophical horror, we arrive at book number 5, The Conspiracy Against the Human Race by Thomas Ligotti. This is not a book for the faint of heart. Ligotti is a philosopher of extreme pessimism, and he wants to convince you of one thing: that consciousness was an evolutionary blunder. He argues that humans are the only creatures on Earth that have been cursed with the ability to know that they exist and to know that their existence is temporary. To deal with this horrific realization, we have built entire civilizations based on distractions. We invent religions, we pursue careers, we fall in love, and we create art, all as a way to avoid looking directly at the fact that we are just biological puppets driven by mindless chemical reactions. Ligotti's writing is like a cold wind that strips away every comfort you've ever relied on. He suggests that the things we value most, our identity, our goals, our sense of purpose, are just coping mechanisms designed to keep us from realizing that we are essentially nothing. He calls our reality a malignant uselessness. It is a book that makes you question the very value of being awake. It asks the question, if our sense of meaning is just a trick played on us by our biology to keep us moving, is anything truly real? Ligotti doesn't just question reality. He questions the worth of experiencing it in the first place. It is a profoundly unsettling read that will make you look at the structures of society as if they are thin cardboard props on a stage that could fall over at any moment. But let's bring it back to something a bit more mind-expanding and perhaps a bit more hopeful. Book number 6 is Gödel, Escher, Bach by Douglas Hofstadter. This is a massive, complex, and incredibly playful book that connects the dots between mathematics, art, and music to explain how consciousness emerges from inanimate matter. Hofstadter's big idea is the strange loop. He argues that you are a self-referential pattern. Think about an ant colony. An individual ant doesn't know what it's doing, it just follows simple rules. But the colony as a whole behaves as if it has a mind of its own. Hofstadter suggests that human consciousness is the same thing. Your neurons don't know who you are. They are just cells firing signals. But because they are arranged in a complex, recursive loop, they create the illusion of a self. This book destroys your sense of reality by showing you that the I you refer to every day is actually a mirage. It is a pattern that emerged from a system that doesn't actually contain a soul or a central controller. By studying the patterns in the music of Bach or the impossible drawings of Escher, Hofstadter shows how systems can wrap around themselves to create something that feels solid, but is actually just a beautiful mathematical trick. After reading this, you start to see your own thoughts as a series of loops. You realize that you aren't a person who has thoughts. You are the thoughts themselves, looping back to look at where they came from. It is a brilliant, exhausting book that will make you feel like your brain is a piece of art that is constantly drawing itself into existence. Finally, we reach the seventh book, the one that ties all these threads together into a knot that you'll never be able to untie. This is The Way of Zen by Alan Watts. Now, you might be thinking that a book about Zen sounds peaceful or relaxing. It is neither of those things. It is a systematic deconstruction of the Western ego. Watts explains that the biggest lie we believe is the idea that we are an ego trapped inside a bag of skin. We think of ourselves as separate entities that come into the world to confront an external reality. Zen argues that this is fundamentally wrong. You didn't come into this world, you came out of it, like a leaf from a tree or a wave from the ocean. Watts shows how our language and our culture force us into a state of duality. Me versus you, light versus dark, subject versus object. But in reality, those things are inseparable. You cannot have a mountain without a valley, and you cannot have a self without an other. Therefore, they are two sides of the same coin. This book destroys your sense of reality by showing you that the boundaries you see are entirely artificial. The wall of your room, the air in your lungs, and the thoughts in your head are all part of one continuous process. When you truly grasp what Watts is saying, the solid world starts to feel more like a fluid. You realize that your identity is just a role you are playing, a mask you have forgotten you are wearing. It is a book that doesn't just change how you think, it changes how you feel the world. It strips away the anxiety of existence by showing you that there is nowhere to go and nothing to achieve, because you are already the thing you are searching for. It is the ultimate reality-shattering realization because it doesn't give you a new theory to believe in, it takes away the believer entirely. So where does that leave us? We've gone from the simulation of culture to the infinite bubbles of the multiverse. From the hallucinations of the brain to the biocentric creation of space and time. We've looked into the pessimistic void and seen ourselves as strange loops of mathematics, only to end up realizing that the boundary between us and the universe is a total fabrication. If you were to read these 7 books in order, I can almost guarantee that the person who finishes the last page will not be the same person who started the first. Your sense of reality is a delicate thing. It's built on the assumption that things are what they appear to be. But these books show us that appearances are the least reliable things we have. There is a certain kind of bravery required to engage with these ideas. It's easy to live in a world where everything makes sense, where the rules are clear, and where the floor is always solid. But that world is a small one. When you allow these authors to dismantle your sense of reality, you aren't just losing something, you are gaining access to the true scale of existence. You are trading a small, comfortable room for the infinite expanse of the unknown. The question is, do you actually want to know? Do you want to see the loose threads in the fabric? Or would you rather go back to believing that the chair you are sitting on is just a chair and that you are just a person? The choice is yours, but once you start reading, the doorway to the ordinary world starts to shrink behind you. I want to challenge you. Pick just one of these books. Whichever one made you feel the most curious or the most uncomfortable, read it with an open mind. Don't try to argue with it. Just let the ideas sit there. Notice how your perception of your daily life starts to shift as you move through the chapters. Notice how the colors seem a little different, how time feels a little more fluid, and how the people around you start to seem like characters in a very complex, very beautiful play. Reality is not a fixed destination. It's a conversation between your mind and the universe. And most of us have been having a very boring conversation for a very long time. It's time to ask some harder questions. It's time to listen to the thinkers who weren't afraid to look into the abyss and describe what they saw. Because even if reality is an illusion, Even if we are just simulations or strange loops or biological puppets, isn't it better to know the truth? Isn't it better to see the machinery behind the curtain than to spend your whole life being fooled by the show? Take a deep breath. Look around your room again. Is it the same room it was 20 minutes ago? Probably not. The more you know about the nature of existence, the more the mundane starts to feel miraculous. These 7 books are the keys to a much larger world. Use them wisely, but remember, there is no going back once you've seen the truth. If you found this exploration of the mind and the universe interesting, there are hundreds of other journeys we can take together. The world of literature is full of these reality-warping maps, waiting for someone brave enough to follow them. Thank you for spending this time in the deep end of the pool with me. Keep your mind open, keep questioning what you see, and most importantly, don't let the solid world fool you. It's much thinner than it looks. See you in the next reality.